When does self-development start becoming a bad thing? Ooh, this one got me. Only because you and I learn very differently. And this is when it was like, oh, I think we have very different ideologies about this. There's a negative return of investment when you kind of overly indulge in self-development. My thought is that if you overly learn but don't apply, all that stuff you learn is just wasted potential. Do you agree or not?
I totally agree.
What you and I differ is because you say I will learn it regardless to have it memorized in my toolbox versus me saying I'll learn it as I go so it becomes pertinent. So we have two different ideologies, correct?
Yeah, I consume a lot of random stuff.
Yes. Like I still listen freaking to a podcast, like 1 or 2 a week, just on a subject matter that I really want to learn and deep dive and understand it, learn it. And you just consume it at 2x speed and probably have 5 podcasts or anything else. So you consume way faster than I do. But for you, you can retain it as a toolbox versus me, I have to learn as I'm doing it because I won't retain it.
When you were in high school, did you ever have to learn how to speed read?
I'll be completely honest with you. Yes, but I did not want to do it because I could not read out loud very well. And now I'm here. Yeah. I'm going to put that publicly.
So with a lot of YouTube or audiobooks, going through it at 2x speed is very similar to speed reading a book, where you're looking just for the key core concepts, but you're not going very deep. I think for you, you go a lot deeper than I do for each of them. So there are things that we discuss where you get into the nitty gritty details of things. And I sometimes completely forget that was even in there.
Yeah, there was one topic of podcast. Did you catch this? It's awesome. No, I didn't.
Yeah, completely missed it. I was like, no, I think I got the header of what they were trying to say, but not the examples.
So before we even go forward on this, what are your thoughts on how people can use this as a bad, how is self-development a bad thing for people if they don't realize, like before they realize it's too late type of thing?
When I know individuals that have read a lot of the self-help books, but they don't take or put any of it into practice, that I think they're wasting their time, right? Reading The Art of Not Giving an F, but still...
It's okay. There you go. I said it. It's not safe for kids. You can say it.
But not an individual that then still cares about every single detail or things that they can't control. They didn't take the lesson out of the book. Especially if you hear them quoting the book, then you're just like questioning what did they get from the book at all. And I think that happens time and time again. There's a few books that are a little bit more foundational for me. Rich Dad, Poor Dad, 4 Hour Work Week, E-Myth.
How to Win Friends and Influence People. For me.
Those are books that you can keep coming back to and you pull from and sometimes become a little bit more foundational. So
I gotta go back to 4 Hour Work Week, by the way. Crap. I stopped that now. It's starting to become very pertinent to me. Hey, crap, I gotta revisit some things.
That was my first book that started all of this stuff.
Mine was The Minimalist.
Okay, here's devil's advocate. Here's devil's advocate. What if you read self-help books the same way you would read a sci-fi book?
I think at a certain point I was like that. Like I didn't read any fiction or anything. Like only thing I was reading was that. And that's when I started also realizing, am I implementing things that I'm learning? And that's how I kind of thought up with that wasted potential kind of concept, is that I just indulge it like it was a story time, which wasn't. It should have been a active practice type of book. And if it didn't resonate you to change, then it should have been stopped like halfway through already.
But is there anything wrong with reading it like a sci-fi book where you don't need to practice anything with it? Like people spend time and effort reading sci-fi, history, crime, all of that stuff, but there's nothing that they're taking into practice.
Feel like when those books are in a play, like the sci-fi books, those are escapisms or just trying to just learn history. Take it maybe as your approach, probably listen to it and put it in a toolbox, but at a certain point, if you don't use it, you lose it. So how much memory, how much you're going to retain if you don't put any into practice anyway to begin with? And so that's how I see it. I see those type of books of an autobiography or a sci-fi book as an escape versus when it comes to self-help, I'm picking up a tool.
I know I'm totally contradicting myself. I'm totally playing devil's advocate here.
You're fine. Do it. I love it.
Do you think someone could get escapism by reading something like The Art of Not Giving a Fuck? They're someone that inherently cares about too much. And by reading that story, it gives them that brief moment of being able to
That they
release.
can, if
Yeah.
they can. Crap, that's a good point. It's kind of filling it's filling the ideology of probably the perception of what they can be.
Or if you're reading Grant X, what is that? Grant Cardone's 10X book.
Oh, don't feel like you love that book. Don't pretend
I
to
love
mess
that
up the
book. But what if
other.
there's an escapism piece of there's two ways to take it. One person takes it and they go apply it by making bigger goals, taking bigger action. The second one is you're reading the book and you can get lost in just how big he's thinking and of these goals and of these things that you may not either A, feel like you have the capabilities of taking that action, but you could get lost in just the story and journey and belief of such a big, grand vision.
That sounds like an asshole, but that just sounds like a waste of time.
I mean, so is watching Marvel movies.
You can respectfully fuck off. How dare you?
It was too
dare
easy.
you.
It was too easy.
How dare you? And to be quite honest, I haven't been watching a lot of Marvel movies anyway because that shit's pumping out too much, and so now it's just becoming kind of boring. Super Mario Bros. Though, haven't seen it. If you haven't seen it yet, watch it. Awesome, great little family flick.
I think in the same way, okay, thinking about it now that we've actually talked about it, because obviously my initial reaction was people are wasting their time on it. I think in the same way someone could get hooked on sci-fi, they could equally be hooked on self-development without needing to take action on it.
Yeah, damn. To me, sounds. I don't know. Sounds. Why are we doing this?
Oh, I don't agree with it, but I think that there is the ability for an individual to pull dopamine from those books in a similar way.
I think we talked about it before. Just reiterate, as a collective, we actually have talked about this too. That both, what is it, and how do you identify the piece of a how, and how do you apply it? So, if we can refer back to this episode. We can refer back to the other episode, but I think it's kind of weird that we're so far in that we can say we can refer to this previous episode. Just a weird thought. Just saying. Link below on this segment of how do you apply knowledge when it comes to. So check that out if you want to hear our thoughts about it, so you don't have to redundantly say it. But yes, that's kind of a weird thing to say that we did so many of these.
Any other thoughts?
I don't know. I just found it so silly because also the perception of self-help books too. I was in my office with two coworkers and they were laughing at one of these guys saying, "Oh, he was reading How to Win Friends and Influence People." The perception now of that book, it feels like they thought it was an influencer book of like social media
Mm-hmm.
instead of what it was. And they started busting out laughing. And I just looked up and saying, I actually read that book like 3 times. And it's probably one of the best books I ever read. And they looked at me like, "Oh, snap, I offended you." But
Did they even read the book?
No, they did. They assumed like it was an influencer, how to be an influencer type of thing, but not saying how to not manage people, but be more having a higher level of EQ. Then, do you think how the perception of do you think self help books is silly, or how do you think that perception has changed over these last few years when you see everything on social media becoming self help? Do you think now that category has a little bit of disdain?
Yeah, I think it's become a little bit saturated. And the category has gotten pretty broad of what's being captured into it. It's hard to judge an individual for reading a book without ever reading the book. And this goes for like any book across the board. There could be things you've heard about it, or maybe you can pull from a title like The Anarchist Cookbook or The Game. But
Great book. I haven't read it, heard about it. It's great.
But those are things that you need to have some context before even judging someone for it. There's a lot of social media stuff, whether it's TikTokers or whatever, that make that kind of content. But I think it's because it's what resonates with a lot of people. Is it correct or right? Everyone has their own opinion.
I have a good book that people think might be sounding weird, but I very literally judging the book by its cover.
Such as?
Artist Seduction by Robert Greene. I saw so many people that I was looking at my phone and they saw that book on my Audible and they're like, "Why are you reading that? Like, why?" I'm like, "It's a good book." It's another EQ type of book saying how analyzing yourself on what kind of, unfortunately, the adjective was seductive, but that can mean on how to befriend somebody. Are you a charmer? How do you play your personality? And it's a good self-identifying type of profile.
Similar to his
But
book,
again,
48 Laws of Power.
so many. So if you haven't read the book or even an open-minded to say why that book, then that's on the other individual judging.
It also goes back to those who believe in EQ versus IQ. It comes down to just being aware of yourself, what you're doing, how it impacts those around you. In leadership styles, there's those that come into a group, they want people to change how they act in order to interact with them, which is harder, especially when you're working with a group of five people. You need five people to change how they're acting to work with you. Or if you have the ability to change yourself
And
and
adapt to
mold,
each person.
it's way faster, quicker, everything like that. And that's part of being able to read people, being able to understand how or what motivates them. All of those things is what you basically get out of those books that may have suggestive titles.
Fair point.